I wonder if you can guess where I am today. Like many a video, this one starts with me saying I'm on Chesil Beach. We come here for two reasons today. One is to have a quick look again at this stuff, which is beaver peat. This is ancient peat from the wetlands that were here before this gravel bank came inland and buried it here. The Fleet Lagoon, which is behind me over here, used to be a lot bigger, and it was a wetlands, and before beavers went extinct in this country there was a peat wetlands here that had beavers living in it. Now, how do we know that it had beavers living in it? Well, the reason being that these chunks of peat, which have washed up from the seabed over there in stormy weather, have been found to contain the bones of beavers. When I was here before, I found a chunk that was full of short pieces of wood, and the piece I picked up looked like maybe it had been gnawed, so it could have been part of a beaver dam. Bit of fishing line there, I'll just make sure that's properly disposed of. So it was a while since I was here before, but I thought I'd come back and have a look at these pieces of peat. They're all very dried up now, but yeah, when people have taken these apart carefully, we found the bones of beavers in them. I'm not expecting to find anything like that today, but I thought I'd just have a look. It looks like the piece I was looking at before that had all the sticks in it has probably fallen apart and been dispersed. So yeah, okay, that isn't the main objective of today anyway. The main objective is to have a look at Babington's Leek again and see if we can fix some scapes. While we're on our way though, we'll have a look at a few other things. This is CP, used to be considered edible. It's a legume, you know, it produces little pods with tiny green peas in them. Used to be considered edible, but now I think people tend to avoid it because it can cause latherism. A very lovely and vibrant looking young specimen of sea kale here. This is edible. It tends to be a little bit bitter, but the really young buds like that there, see, that's essentially broccoli. People do pick that and eat it. I've picked it and eaten it once or twice, and I found it was very, very strong tasting. I could actually still taste it the next day. But people also blanch sea kale, so grow it in the garden, cover it over with a sheet of corrugated iron or something and soil on top, and that causes the shoots to go chlorotic, to go pale, and they try to grow out to reach the light, and then when you unearth them they're nice and tender and sweet, a bit like forcing rhubarb. And people who live very close to the beach, like perhaps the people in these houses here, have the opportunity to do that on the beach obviously as well, to cover up a plant of sea kale and force it in situ. More bits of beaver peat here. So yeah, you know, we could take a piece of this and carefully take it apart and look at it under a microscope, and you'd see the pollen grains and seeds of the plants that were here tens or perhaps even hundreds of thousands of years ago when that peat was laid down. Anyway, yeah, like I say, that's not our main objective for today. The main objective is to get and have a look at the Babington's leeks, which are up ahead somewhere. I want to see if I can pick some of the flower stalks. So these are Babington's leeks. They are just leeks. This is the ancestor of, or probable ancestor of, cultivated leeks. This is the part I'm here for today, which is the scapes, the flower buds. So I'm going to find a nice patch of these where those scapes are a bit more abundant, and we're going to pick and cook and eat these wild leek scapes. So this is a perennial plant, and we're doing no harm to it by harvesting these scapes like this. The plant will stay alive even if we cut it off at ground level. It's a perennial, it will grow back from the roots. So this is a really rather nice and sustainable method of foraging, and I think these things are going to be delicious, but we won't know until we try. Now, always when foraging, it's necessary to not only understand and properly identify the thing you're foraging, but also just to make sure that you carefully pick the thing that is your target plant. So here we've got some Babington's leeks, and right here we've got daffodils. To the untrained eye, the foliage could be potentially similar. If you're just going and grabbing handfuls of leek foliage, you could well end up with some daffodil foliage in with it, and daffodils are quite toxic. Those will make you very sick. And yeah, again, to the untrained eye, I suppose that daffodil seed head could look a little bit like one of the scapes from the leeks. So yeah, like I say, necessary when you're foraging to not only understand and identify the thing that you're intending to pick, but also to be judicious when you're doing the picking. And also, we should be responsible as foragers. So I'm not picking anything that's endangered here. I'm not endangering it by picking it, because I'm only picking the top part. I'm not killing the plant when I pick it. And as you can see along this bank here, Babington's leek has no problem reproducing and spreading later in the year. So the scapes I haven't picked will grow, and when they mature they contain aerial bulbils, sky onions, and each one of those little bulbs is potentially capable of growing into another plant. So we're not in danger of doing any great harm to the population of these leeks. Obviously, if everyone did it, if everyone in the world came here and picked these leeks, that might be a problem, but not everyone is going to. And yes, if I got to the point where I was here and I could see that somebody had come along and wantonly picked half of the entire population, I might just go home empty-handed by choice. I did think about growing these in the garden, because the aerial bulbils could be harvested and just grown on, and they would produce a clump of leeks which I could harvest in the same way as I'm doing here. But I decided against that for a couple of reasons. One, it's not that difficult for me to get here and forage these in the wild, but also I was a little bit concerned about introducing a wild and quite vigorous growing allium to the garden. After my experience with three-cornered leek back at the old house, which was introduced by accident and destroyed the garden basically with its vigor, I decided against it. So instead at home I'm growing my regular leeks as perennials, just cutting off the tops. I've shown that in a couple of previous videos, and they will grow in much the same way. And while we're here, look at this plant. This is a goji berry. It's quite a common, it's not native, but it's quite a common coastal, I suppose slightly invasive plant. So if we came here at the right time of year, we could pick goji berries. It likes these coastal conditions, and so it's spread very rapidly, and there are populations of this all along the coast of Britain, at least the south coast anyway. I don't think it's invasive in the sense that it destroys anything else. Actually, it doesn't seem to, you know, it's naturalized rather than a problematic invasive plant. I suppose when people talk about invasive things, they're talking about things that swamp and smother and outcompete the native things. Otherwise, they're just generally described as naturalized. But there is a fuzzy line between those two. And of course, we couldn't walk past hemlock water dropwort without mentioning it. This lovely, fresh looking parsley-like plant is hemlock water dropwort. It has parsnip-like roots, although they're chambered rather than solid. It's deadly poisonous, and it's possibly the most deadly poisonous plant we have in the UK. It's probably vying for first place with things like poison hemlock and aconite and monkshood and things like that. But yeah, suffice to say, this is a very, very poisonous plant. We leave this one alone. So again, we can see this, the green foliage here is goji berry. The tree is not goji berry, this is a tamarisk, but the plant climbing up through it is a goji berry, or wolfberry I think is another name for it, which I think is a misnomer based on the fact that the Latin name sounds a bit like it's the Latin for wolf, but it's not. I'll put some information on screen about that. Yeah, in fact the whole hedge here is goji berries climbing and sprawling up through the tamarisk. Now interestingly, we've got some different scapes here. This is Allium roseum, rosy flowered garlic. This will eventually open into pink radial clusters of flowers with, again, aerial bulbils in between the flower stems. This is one which I have picked and eaten before. There's a whole video called Sky Onions about this plant. I'm not going to pick these today, even though I'm sure those would be edible and delicious. Well, actually, maybe I'll just pick a couple of these. Yeah, these are tougher. I don't think the scapes on these, yeah, just trying to pick that. I don't think the scapes on these will be so good to eat because that stem is tougher. It's not snapping. So I'm going to leave these be. This is not a native plant. This one's introduced and it is a little bit invasive, but that's Allium roseum. Yeah, later on, pink flowers and kind of rosy maroon aerial bulbils in clusters. It's edible, the whole plant's edible, but the scapes here are probably a little bit tough. Right, I have enough of these lovely wild leek scapes now, at least for a little taste. Let's get back to Shrimp Cottage and see what we can do with them. So I've got these beautiful wild leek scapes here, which I've washed. What are we going to do with them? Oh, just to mention also, any kind of allium that produces flower heads like this, you could use them in the same way, as long as they're tender enough. That's really the only criteria. With alliums, the whole thing is edible, the whole plant is edible, but not always palatable. These had a natural snap point where I bent them and it just snaps off. So you can tell it's really crisp and fresh. If it didn't do that, you might find it's a bit fibrous or woody and maybe unpleasant. But yeah, any allium scapes like onions, chives, garlic, anything that produces flower heads like this and is an allium, you could do this with. Anyway, I'm going to make a kind of a cheesy rarebit thing. So these are going to go on toast with a cheesy sauce. First thing I need to do is get these mostly chopped up and then we'll pre-cook them because I think they will need a little bit of pre-cooking. So I'm just going to select a couple of nice ones first because we'll keep those whole. So I'll have those three and keep them whole. And the rest of them I'll cut about there. These stem pieces I'll cut up quite small. And those are going to go in the pan first because they will probably need the most cooking. So frying pan, a little bit of butter in there, a little bit of olive oil just because that's a combination I like. And those little cut bits of stem can go straight in there. I'm going to cook those ever so gently just to tenderize them while I cut up the flower bud bits. So these I thought might be interesting if we have a look inside of these. So we can see inside, that's basically a little flower that's waiting to open and form. And I think that's what I'm going to do with these bits. I'll slice them all like that, lengthways, and then I'll chop these up into slightly bigger pieces. The aroma coming off of these is quite strong. Despite these being leeks, and leeks usually being quite a mild vegetable, the wild form, the Babington's leek, is quite pungent. We don't need to worry about little animals inside of these buds because they are actually completely closed. They're completely sealed at the moment, so there's no worries about passengers in there. Yeah, and those I'm just going to chop up into slightly coarser pieces. And those can go in the pan as well. And yeah, these here, I think we'll just probably have a bit of the stem off them. These are going to be my garnish. And I'm going to leave these just in half like that. These are a few of my favourite things. I've got some coastal cheddar here, a really lovely mature cheddar. Burford Browns, my favourite eggs. Some of my Spanish wild thyme and my homemade honey finish cider. I'm going to grate a bit of this cheddar. Good bit of that grated. We'll just set that aside for a moment. We'll have an egg. Bit of my wild thyme. I'm probably not going to add salt to this because this cheese is quite salty. Oh, there's a little dog watching me. Okay, there's a cheese tax. Fine, I'll give you a bit of cheese. I think we could maybe have a bit more cheese in there, just looking at the consistency of it. And then those cooked pieces of the Leek Scapes, the little chopped up pieces anyway, are going to go in there. So cheese and onion, basically, it's not a combination I invented. I'm going to have some of this, a tiny little bit of this honey finish cider in there just to give it another flavour. This is going to probably be quite vigorous when I open it. Wish me luck. Whoa. Yeah. Now this needs to be poured all in one hit because it's got a lot of sediment in it, so that's why I've got 2 glasses out, so that I don't have to tip the bottle back up straight. Obviously I'm not going to put all of that in the cheese dish here. That's my drink to accompany my lunch. And we'll stop there because yeah, there's sediment in the bottom. That's what the honey finish thing does. All of the apple solids and yeast and everything settled out. So when that's finished being fizzy, well actually I'll have a little taste while that's still being fizzy. That just keeps getting better, that cider. So I'm going to have a little splash of that in there, which will loosen that up a bit. That looks about right. Except one more little thing that goes with cheese is mustard. So a bit of whole grain mustard in there, and we'll just mix that in. That's got to go on top of some bread, which is going to be this nice malted sandwich loaf. I'd love to tell you I made this bread, but I haven't had time this morning. I've been out picking leeks. So let's just say I made it to the shops in time to buy this. A couple of nice thick slices. Now, I'm going to butter these on the wrong side, and there is a method to my madness, which will become apparent in a moment. That's the underside. So now, this mixture goes on the top, and it is very gloopy at the moment, but it will set as soon as it starts cooking because it's got that egg in there. So just spread that to the edges. Share it out between the 2 slices. I'm going as close as I can, as close as I dare to the edges, because that will stop that bread from burning. If you can't get out and forage Leek Scapes, spring onions from the shops would be very nice in this kind of a recipe. If you don't have, I've got homemade cider, you could buy some cider. If you don't drink, you could use a little bit of milk in there. Now, wonder of wonders, I have been dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century. I've got an air fryer now. I don't think that both of these will fit in the basket. Oh, maybe they will, actually. So I'm going to put them on top of that bit so they get a chance to cook nicely underneath. No, I didn't think so. Right, let's do that. Okay, this bit is designed so that you can put one thing on the bottom and another thing on top and cook 2 things together. Right, that's going to go in the air fryer, 200 Celsius for probably less than 15 minutes. Okay, those are done. That only took about 7 or 8 minutes. And here we'll see the reason for buttering the underside is that that has fried and got a little bit crispy. So I think we'll do a, well, not a diagonal, not a straight across cut. We'll do an atomic shrimp, annoying cut. There we go. And that filling in there is still a little bit kind of souffle, saucy sort of thing. Okay, and just my little garnish. There we go. And if you think about it, that's a ploughman's lunch there. It's cheese and bread and onions and cider. Anyway, I think we'll go and eat this out in the lovely spring sunshine outside. Okay. I think the first thing to do is taste one of these just scapes on their own. These are just cooked in butter. Temptation with anything like this is to compare it to asparagus, but it is actually quite a bit like asparagus, but onion flavoured asparagus. The little bit inside the flour is especially nice. It's like an artichoke heart. That's really good. Right, before this gets cold, let's taste a little bit. So that egg is actually just ever so delicately set like scrambled eggs. We keep losing the light because the sun's going in and out of the clouds. So yeah, the egg is just set really nicely like a souffle or like really delicate scrambled eggs. That coastal cheddar and the mustard is a fantastic combination. There's such a good backdrop to these Babington's Leek Scapes, which are quite a punchy vegetable. Make no mistake about it. These are not mild. This is a punchy flavoured vegetable. It's like cultivated leeks, but with garlic added. Such a tasty treat. Were you worried there wasn't a bit for you? There's a bit with no onions on it, okay? Good girl. So that was my cheesy rarebit, made with foraged Babington's Leek Scapes. I hope that's been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.